Howdy folks, in today's episode we'll uncover the secrets to building a successful photography business, from mastering the hustle to creating art and marketing yourself, with one of the industry's most versatile pros, right after this. Welcome to Camera Shake, where we bring you the insider scoop on all things photography and videography, giving you a unique opportunity to stay ahead of the curve. As always, I'm your host, Kirsten Nuts, and before we dive in, I've got a quick favor to ask. I've noticed that over 65% of our viewers on YouTube and listeners on audio aren't actually subscribed to this channel. Come on, people, help me out by hitting that subscribe button. It'll help me bring even more amazing guests, like today's, to the show. It's just one click. That's all it takes. Thank you so much. Now, without further ado, let's give it up for today's special guest, the master of commercial and fine art photography, lens-based artist, educator, and someone who has done it all, from weddings to wildlife. Please welcome Mr. Bob Coates. Bob, how's it going?
I'm better now. I'm starting to turn red from that description. Holy mackerel.
I haven't even mentioned all the awards that you've won in your career yet.
I have been very, very fortunate. But, it's just I can't tell you how much photography has done and been for me over the years.
And I started the intro by saying that we're going to be talking about how to start a successful photography business. Now, those of you listening and watching, if you cast your mind back to the episode last week where I spoke to a friend of mine, Simon Turner, who was just starting out in the world of photography. He's just set up his own business. And of course, he's been talking about the trials and tribulations, the fears and the insecurities that come along with setting yourself up in any business, but of course, in particular, in photography. And that's what we're going to talk about today, because, Bob, I know your career has, it's so wide-ranging in terms of, the type of photography that you've, the type of things that you've shot. And I know that you have a plethora of advice to give for anybody starting out. So just give us a helicopter view over your career in business, because I know you started out back in the Caribbean. Is that right?
Yeah. So actually I started a little bit before that as far as getting my photography going. I mucked about with photography. I call it mucking about, picking up a camera, putting it down, winning an occasional contest here and there, starting, playing and practicing darkroom, all that kind of stuff, for about 13 years before I decided to turn pro. And my turn pro was I was running restaurants and I was working 18 hours a day in the Caribbean going, well, I'm not really enjoying this beach stuff anymore because I don't get out. So at one point I said, I really sat down and said, what do I really want to do? And I've always appreciated photography, which I sort of got into because I couldn't do art with a pen. I mean, I could, but it never, what was in here got onto the paper. And so I started looking, a little bit more, how can I start to do that? So I started with photography. I have to say that my wife was, at the time, my girlfriend. We borrowed a friend's camera, went on vacation together to the Caribbean, back to where I had lived at one time. And when we got the pictures back, she says, wow, it looks like you might have a little talent here. Would you like me to buy you a camera and some lenses? Well, okay, if you have to. So she was, she's basically the impetus for me moving forward in photography. And then that was picking it up, putting it down. Then I was living in the Caribbean, doing a lot of different careers, which I highly recommend for people, which sounds a little bit strange. You want to be a photographer? Learn marketing. Marketing in business is one thing. You work really hard, you buy better lenses, you buy more cameras, you practice and try and make beautiful pictures. And if you don't have a way to get your name out there, if you don't have a way to know how much you should charge, if you don't have a way to have money in your pocket at the end of the day, when I first started out, I went to every single photographer on the island and said, "Hi, can I carry your stuff for 6 months? I'll help you. I'll do whatever you need. I'll be your bag boy." And to a person, they all said, "No, I would never share my secrets with somebody else." And that sort of set the platform for my career, in that I will share everything that I know almost all the time, because of not having that to begin with. So what was the result of that? So the next question I asked was, well, what should I charge if I wanted to take a photograph of this bottle? What should I charge to take that photograph of the bottle? As I have a little drink. Oh, that's right. Nobody can see this sometimes. And to a man, again, and a woman, they said, "No, I'm not sharing my pricing with you." And I said, "Why won't you share your pricing with me? Because you'll undercut me." And I was like, "No, I'm trying not." So I did. I went on my own, and I was like charging $50 an hour for stuff. Man, I was a good marketer because of my background in radio and a few other jobs that I had done. So I'm working like a fiend. And every month I didn't have any money at the end of the month. So how did I try and fix that? Well, I tried to do more volume. And that doesn't work. So eventually I became a member of the American Society of Media Photographers, and I got the ASMP Business Bible. And after reading 6 chapters, that was the time that I realized I'm trying to make money, but I'm trying to make up for not having enough money by doing more volume, but I'm still not charging enough. I should have been charging 2 or 3 times more than what I should have been at $150 an hour versus $50 an hour. And it just made a huge difference once I became a member of, an association that kind of pointed me in the right direction.
And I think that's super awesome advice, because there are people in the world who have the answer to all of the questions that you might have when you first set up your own business. It's just about going out and finding them. And associations like that are really useful for that. There's similar associations over here in the UK, for example, that people could become a member of and tap into all that knowledge.
Yeah, I've been a big proponent of being a member of organizations. I've probably been a member of Professional Photographers of America since 1997. And as soon as we left the Caribbean and moved to Arizona, I became a member of the local association. They called them affiliates at the time. They're now called community partners. But that's to get some monthly hands-on, and it's amazing when you go to conventions and you go to meetings, the amount of learning that happens in the halls. I know that sounds weird, but yes, you go to hear a speaker, and even if it's not your genre, let's say somebody's speaking on wedding photography, you're like, well, why would I go see a wedding photographer because I'm a portrait photographer? There's always nuggets from, that's one of the reasons why I've ended up in so many different genres over my career. I would point myself in a direction, and once I got bored with that, or wasn't happy with it, or I needed more money, or whatever the case may be, I learned more, and I found that cross-pollinating my wedding work informed my commercial work. My commercial work informed my artwork. Everything cross-pollinates an amazing amount. And I think that's why I've ended up. And I also need a challenge. If I don't have a challenge, my wife's not going to be a happy camper, because I need something to keep me going, to push me in directions, to really make things happen.
What are some other advantages of joining associations like that? Because I know, in the very beginning, this is the catch-22 very often. People in the very beginning, they think, oh, I really haven't got any money, but then, why would I pay, membership fees to associations like that, but I can't really afford to, put food on the table, so to say. But what are some of the other advantages that make it really worth it?
Oh, well, just number one, just that variety of you may not know that you want to do wedding work if you haven't seen a really good wedding photographer sharing his images or her images and how they promote and how they sell. Again, that marketing and business is so much more important, and you're not really going to find so much of that on YouTube per se, because photographers don't really want to watch marketing. And I used to, every program that I ever did or have done over the years, I kind of sneak a little bit of marketing stuff in. So in my Photoshop classes, I'll be like, okay, here's how you design a business card that doesn't look like crap. Here's how you create promotional materials to have commercial folks look at it and not feel like you don't know what you're doing. So always tried to drop some of those in. But being a member of organizations, the networking, once people get to know you and they know your work, oh, I have a job that I can't do or don't want to do. You know what? They will then, point that in somebody else's direction. And if you're there and you're networking and you're a good guy or a good girl, you enjoy yourself, you're a pleasant person, it's very possible that you're going to pick up some work that you never would have had you not been networking and being in the organization. That's especially in the local ones.
And I always feel that, again, especially when you're first starting out, and you will come up against these obstacles, hurdles, and therefore come up against these insecurities all the time, especially in the beginning. That when you're a member of an association like that, you actually end up surrounding yourself with people who fully understand where you're at, because they may have gone through that themselves. And so rather than thinking, I'm worthless because why is everybody else around me successful? That's one of the misconceptions that the internet can conjure up very, very easily. You think like everybody else is doing great, and this just for some reason it's not working out for me. But I think when you surround yourself with people who are in the same boat, or at least remember what it was like being in that boat, that can really do a lot for your confidence and for your self-esteem as well.
Absolutely. When you're watching Instagram and Facebook and, all that stuff, you're only seeing the person's A roll. You're not seeing the B roll, the C roll, and the D roll, and the cutting room floor. I think John Sexton said, I'm a very, very good photographer because I have a very large wastebasket. In other words, you don't need to, when you're marketing yourself, you don't need to show every shot that you took. Just cherry pick and do the bestest ones that you can. If you look at my bcphotography.com page, actually, I haven't been staying up on top of that, but it's still producing work for me because of the way it's laid out and the type of imagery that's there. It's just good, clean commercial imagery, mixed in with a lot of press that I've received over the years, which brings me back around to that marketing thing. So every time I've managed to score an award or, done some thing for the community, either designing and printing a calendar to raise money for Meals on Wheels or for the Arts Center, that became fodder for my production. So you'll see it in my website. So mixed in with the images are, oh, this guy supports his community. Oh, this guy has another article written about him by somebody else. I got news for you. I wrote almost all of those articles. But they got printed. And because they were printed, that gives them an extra voice. It's not me telling people that I'm good at what I do. I always try and find a way to find out. I ask for testimonials whenever when I do my jobs. Hey, and people are like, oh my God, the job was so great. And you say, hey, would you mind, sharing that with me so that I can put it out there that you thought that I did a good job? And if you do that and you don't get a response, they already told you everything. Write down what they told you, send it back to them and say, hey, does this sound like what you'd say? So that they don't even have to take the time to write it, but they can approve it and add their name to it.
Yeah, most people don't realize that, press releases go a long way. And it's actually, it's not the newspaper writing the press release. They're just getting them in. They're always glad when they get something that they can print, especially, because it fills space on their page, so most people don't realize that it's actually not really a reporter from the newspaper writing that article. They're just editing it so they've got content to put it out. That's
correct. And if and people say, "Well, the press releases don't work. I sent one out." No, you have to keep sending them out, and you have to write with the style of whatever the newspaper or magazine is that you're sending it to. They all have a certain flavor, a certain style. So actually, if you go to successful-photographer.com, if you take a look on there, there's a section where it says press releases, or is that on bcphotography.com? It's on one of those. But if you look up where I've showed how my press releases have, ended up in the papers, when I first started writing them, I didn't even include a headshot. And they got printed, but it was just black text and a headline and, Bob Coates, blah, blah, blah. After a while, I thought, you know what? I really should send a headshot in. And that makes it easier for them to create more space or less space because they can make the headshot bigger or smaller to help them fill those column inches. And then it was like, wait a minute, I'm a photographer. Why am I not sending them pictures that I'm talking about as well? And always wrote those from the thing of I would get those testimonials and build them in there. And, not be just me saying, oh, well, I'm good. It would be my client saying I was good, or the judges in a contest saying that the imagery was good. Again, just finding ways to get other people to put you forward versus yourself makes a huge, huge difference in that marketing stuff.
That's actually a great piece of advice. Always make sure you get these testimonials from other people, whether that's built into a press release, which is super important. And again, it gives it more gravitas, but also, Google reviews. That's a good example. Testimonials, and then show them on your website.
Exactly. Now, one thing to be very careful of is you can't have all testimonials being absolutely spectacular. You share real testimonials, even the ones that don't necessarily put you in totally great light. Make sure that there's a name attached to it and ask people before you do that. And if you'll notice on my successful-photographer site, my testimonials have a headshot of the person who sent me that testimonial and links back to their website. Ooh, links in and out of your website help create more traffic for you. By the way, when you send me a testimonial, I'm going to run a link back to your website, which, again, those interlinks on the web, I don't know how important they are now, but they seem to be, if you have links coming in and out, makes a big difference in your search engine performance.
And of course, there's always this social media. And of course, a lot is being talked about the impact of social media when it comes to marketing. But again, for somebody starting out, what would be a good kind of marketing strategy when it comes to, what's the word? Leveraging. No, what's the word? Leveraging. That's the word. That's what I'm looking for. Leverage. Yeah. But so when it comes to leveraging your social media accounts in your favor, what would be a good strategy for that?
Okay. Now, I'm a little bit out of the loop on this as far as things go, but I have lots of ideas. The way I use it now is different than somebody new coming on. I'm pretty much, I will, on my Instagram, I will run out photos on a regular basis, but then I will also tag them with the camera companies that I work with, and of course the subject matter that's in there. If somebody has written a really good testimonial, there's a guy named Colby McLemore out of Tennessee. He's a good buddy of mine, and I've been watching him leverage Google, and every Google thing comes through, of course, is in the regular website, but then he illustrates it. He puts the headshot in, and he goes, "Got another 5-star review from blah 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 blah," and it's an actual person and their words in quotes, and they're getting out there on a regular, and they're out there all the time on Facebook and LinkedIn. He may have them in other places as well, but and obviously on Google. So that's an excellent way to, when you get those accolades from anybody about anything to do with your photography, whether it's a great image and you won a contest, or you did a great job for them, their headshot is, earning them money now because they look so good, and you were responsible for that. The fact that I know that he also promotes his business with, hey, I'm out there showing that I can get this job done really, really fast and really, really well. So I'm going to save you money. You may pay me more, but how much does a lawyer make per hour? How much does a doctor make per hour? How much time do they have in a day to devote to staying on top of their headshots? So if you have somebody who is constantly reminding them, hey, you need a new headshot. You don't need to spend a whole lot of time with it. I can make that happen for you. And look, here's my new, and he shows his new screen that he's bringing. Look at how easy it's going to be to pick your image before we retouch it and get it ready for you. So that's an excellent way to constantly keep, number one, your name and face out there. You're showing the love that you're getting from your clients, which is, super important.
Hey, let me just jump in real quick to tell you about the amazing sponsor of this episode, Platypod. Platypod offers innovative camera support systems designed to unleash your creativity. With their stable, versatile, and portable solutions, you can capture stunning shots like never before. And I'm not just saying that. As the host of the Camera Shake podcast, I can personally vouch for Platypod's incredible products. They've become an integral part of the show. In fact, I'm surrounded by various Platypod products holding up lights, cameras, microphones, and so on. It's really helped to transform the way I make the show and the way I shoot at home, in the studio, and on location. But don't just take my word for it. Explore Platypod's website at www.platypod.com to discover their range of products, including the Platypod Extreme, Platypod tripod heads, and the brand new handle, of course. Make sure to follow Platypod on Instagram and Facebook at Platypod Tripods for exclusive updates, tips, and giveaways. By choosing Platypod, you're not only investing in your photography, but you're also supporting the Camera Shake Photography Podcast. Thanks again to Platypod, our amazing sponsor. Platypod, where innovation never sleeps. When you were first starting out, what was the biggest challenge that you faced in the beginning?
Imposter syndrome, not feeling that I was up to stuff. The other part, one of the biggest things was not practicing enough before I tried to put myself forward as a professional. Saying, yes, I can do that job, and then figuring out how to do it is probably not the best way, but I know that I did a lot of OJT, on the job training, where I would say, yes, I can do that. And, a shoot may take me, especially when I first started shooting jewelry. Oh my goodness. Jewelry is like, oh, this is incredibly hard because there's so much to it. You have the gold to shape that properly, the facets, making them show up, the scene that you're going to put them in. And you're thinking, oh yeah, well I can just, and then you get your pictures back and you're like, oh, this is a problem here. I need to shoot this again. What did I learn on this one? And then maybe shoot it 4 or 5 times and take 2 or 3 days to get something that you should already know how to do if you're putting yourself forward as a pro. But, I always made my clients happy eventually.
Yeah, and I think imposter syndrome that's probably one of the biggest things, especially in the beginning.
Yeah, there's and I still run into it. Is my work as, every time I start to think that I'm a pretty good photographer, I go out there and look to see those who really are. But then I also have to remember that I'm only seeing their A-roll. I don't see the stuff the 10,000 images that they made to get to the point where they could make these all the time. And that's, building up your success. And that's where let's go back to the organizations. Putting your images forward into image competitions. So I'm not talking photography groups where there's not professionals watching your work, but talking about organizations, like that are affiliated with Professional Photographers of America or your professional organizations over there. When you put your images forward in there, you often get feedback that's like, wow, that's really good. Your composition's good. You're there. But what if you did this, and this to take it to the next level? Or you're not seeing the light yet, or you're not seeing, even more important, one thing that I found is learn to look for the shadows. Shadows create the depth and dimension. For the longest time, I kept hearing, look for the light, look for the light, look for the light. No, look for the shadows. What's the shadow edge transition look like? How many words do you have for shadows? Oh, there's a reflected shadow. There's a contact shadow. There's a look online from artists to see how they create shadows and things with pencils. And you go, oh, you'll find out that there's a billion names. Well, not a billion. There's a lot of names for shadows and light. And the more language that you have, I'm a big proponent of vocabulary. The more words that you have dealing with photography, with shadow, with light, with depth of field, with the science that goes in there, the more you have those, the more you can pre-visualize something, because if you don't know what a specular highlight is, how can you think about it in your brain? Because you don't have a picture for it. So once you learn a deeper vocabulary, you will become a better photographer. I promise. It's like one of those weird things. It's like, Bob, you want me to learn words to become a better picture taker? Come on. But it's been proven along the way.
And you mentioned the word practice as well, which I think a lot of people tend to forget about. As a musician, I know that practice is super important because, as I say, practice makes perfect. But as a photographer, I always think that it's exactly the same thing. When I first got into headshot photography, I spent months and months and months just practicing. First with members of my family, who very quickly got very tired of having to sit as a model for me all the time.
I don't want to sit here anymore.
Yeah, especially my wife. And my youngest daughter was probably my biggest victim. She's so funny. When she first got a cell phone, like her first cell phone, like she would literally sit there and she'd look at her cell phone and I'd be like, you ready? She'll pose, I take a picture, straight back on the phone. And it's one of these things. But then I got hold of a rubber head, one of these, whatever you call them, one of these rubber heads.
A model that's not going to complain. Absolutely.
Exactly. And, I used to spend, I don't know how many hundreds or thousands of hours just trying out different lighting concepts and, single lights setups and 2 lights and 3 lights and a gazillion lights, and all that kind of stuff. And every time you learn a little bit, and it's actually the failures, as I always felt, it's the failures that teach you a lot more than the successes in the end.
Absolutely. I call it failing forward. If you're not failing, then you're not pushing yourself to a next thing. If you always do everything you've done, that's as good as you're ever going to get. So constantly, and that's, again, like I say, I need that challenge. So my challenge is to get in there and practice, try, work on things and that's whether you're doing, working with animals in the wild or landscapes or whatever. You need to spend time in the chair or out, on the rock, whatever the case may be. If you're doing people, then you need to get people in front of your camera, or at the very least, get yourself a head.
Yeah.
Or a torso. Find a mannequin in your neighborhood,
Yeah. What really fascinates me about your photography is that you're really sort of a master of so many different genres, everything from wildlife to to portraiture to all sorts of different things. It's often said, 'cause I was going to ask you about this. You hear a lot of people say that you have to specialize. You have to focus in on one thing and then get really good at that, as opposed to being a generalist. What is your sort of attitude towards that?
Couple of things. Excuse me. One, I live in a small town, and even when I was in the Virgin Islands, that was a larger, small town. So you had, in order to make a living, you couldn't just be a commercial photographer. You had to do, headshots. You had to do portraits. You had to do commercial work. Eventually I got dragged kicking and screaming into weddings, which I was never going to do because I was a commercial photographer. The secret is to make sure that you understand and master one genre and market that. Because if you market your commercial photography, there's people on the other side of that commercial. There's your marketing person, there's the owner, there's whoever you're photographing if you're doing lifestyle type things for the business. They all need photography in their lives for other things. So once you've dialed in on one thing really well, and you're like, gosh, I really want to start doing weddings, you can start mentioning, oh, by the way, I heard your so-and-so is going to get married, or if you hear of anybody getting married, again, you kind of target on one and then kind of work out from there. And mostly everything that me moving on to the next genre, but never leaving the other behind, was that I need that challenge and want to do more and keep seeing things. I'm like, oh man, I really like, the time in nature now is really important to me. So I've kind of been pushing my life into that direction. Because now I've always been an educator along the way, and I've never wanted to do or run workshops per se, because I hate herding cats, if you will. But I've found my niche here in Sedona. I'm now doing Milky Way night sky workshops, but it's limited to 4 people. And so it's gotten, it's very nice. And so now I'm, pushing in that direction. So you say, how do you market that? Well, that's back onto, I'm, posting Milky Way images from here, posting testimonials from my clients, the website itself, posting on Instagram, posting on LinkedIn. Just saying, hey, by the way, I've got 2. No, by the time this runs, my Milky Way season will be over until next year.
By the way, I'm very jealous of the Milky Way shot you did for Platypod a few months ago. That was just a absolute stunning shot.
Oh, it took me like 4 months to figure that one out and to wait for everything to go. And Kirsten's referring to one where I've got a Bell Rock, which is a beautiful, well-known rock formation in the foreground. The Milky Way is coming right out of the top of it, and then I've gone straight up over the top, and then behind me there's another nice subject, red rocks in the background. It's called an extreme vertorama. Yeah, you can find that on the Platypod site. I've got some stuff up there.
It's a stunning shot. It's such a stunning shot. I'm so jealous because over here in the UK, if I look up at the sky, well, it's mostly cloudy most of the time.
I understand, because I subscribe to one of the apps from a telescope company over in Devon, and if you punch the button, if you don't punch location here, it comes up there, and I'm like, oh, it's always cloudy over there.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, it's one of these things. So yeah, I mean, I don't think I've even actually ever seen the Milky Way. I don't think I have.
You might have, if you were ever in a dark sky area. The thing that people don't understand is our eyes only have one aperture when they're looking at the sky. So what you see when you look at the Milky Way is just this wisp of a cloud that runs across. And you would say, oh, well, that's a cloud. No, that's the Milky Way. Where all the color and the life and the beauty come from is because we have wide apertures on our cameras, taking long exposures. So we're gathering tons of light, and then blending those images together, and then working out so that you can see the clouds and the stars and everything different, which is my latest challenge, because I think of Milky Way photography and night sky photography as a 4D chess game. at the very least.
And it very much reminds me of Northern Lights photography, because I spent, was it last October, I went to the Lofoten Islands to run a masterclass workshop with my friend Dave Williams. And so I was doing the on-location portraiture and, portrait lighting bit, and he was teaching the Northern Lights photography. And so for me, again, I say this all the time, it's a massive, amazing learning experience, because I'd never even seen the Northern Lights before. And just like you described the Milky Way, sometimes it's very similar with the Northern Lights, where you look up and you think, "Oh, is that a cloud?"
It's not
but
really
then, of course,
there.
When you take a photo of it, all of a sudden you realize, "Oh, no, that is actually green. So that's the Northern Lights." But of course, the most phenomenal experience is, and this is, and I know anecdotally, I have friends who went to Northern Norway, and they spent 2 weeks there, and they came back and they go, I haven't really seen anything. I wonder whether you can only see the Northern Lights through the camera. Is it not something you can see with the naked eye? And I always say, well, if you have the right guy like Dave Williams, then it's the most amazing experience when you actually look up and the sky just explodes all around you, and it's like, can you see with the naked eye? Hell yes, you can, because when the light show goes off,
place, for sure.
Right place at the right time, absolutely. That's the thing. Because up there, it was pitch black at night, and so it might happen that we'd be out in the total prairie, like out in the countryside, out in the islands somewhere, 250 miles north of the Arctic Circle. That's nothing there. There's no houses, there's no lights, no light pollution, nothing. It's pitch black. It's actually pitch black.
Portal 1, baby.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And you're surrounded by, black granite mountains, like 3,000 feet tall, So the chances are, you look in one direction, one of the reasons why you can't see anything is because there's a huge bloody mountain in front of you. So if you're waiting for Northern Lights to appear in that direction, you can kiss that goodbye, because you're just looking at a wall of granite. You're not even looking at the sky, And that's where you need, an expert guide to basically say, okay, well, this is a really great location, and this is the way we're looking and all the rest of it. So that's, it makes all the difference. How did you, you mentioned you started doing tours, like night sky photography, Milky Way photography tours. That's a really interesting aspect, because you've taken something, a new genre basically, and then you've almost like, you've made it commercially viable in a sense. Is that sort of a natural instinct with everything that you do?
Almost everything that I've done in my life, I teach. So even when I was first in the Caribbean, and I was teaching windsurfing. Strangely enough, I ended up writing an article for the Windsurf magazine saying, hey, here's something that you need to keep in mind when you're teaching dyslexic people. And wrote an article, and so many people wrote back and said, I never thought of that, because you would say, tilt the sail to the left, tilt the sail to the right, and dyslexic people have no idea. 10% of the population is dyslexic. So over the years, almost everything that I've done, when I ran restaurants, I was teaching, bartenders and waiters and, proper service and making sure things were going on. When on my photography, I've felt that I learn so much more when I teach, because I have to find, number one, I have to research it really well. If I say I'm going to teach this, I'm going to really dig in and research deeper than I would if it's just for myself. And then I also need to have 3 or 4 different ways to describe almost everything that I teach, because some people learn visually, some people learn, this way. Some people, like when you put their hands on it, they're like, oh, and when you see those lights go on, I've found that probably, and I'm not sure if I'm saying this phrase properly, but my raison d'être, my reason for being is to teach and share. And I just absolutely, when that light goes on, it's just so exciting to see. So in answer specifically to your Milky Way, I started probably about 6 years ago of photographing it more and more, and then started putting it out there, and people started asking me questions, and I was like, wow, there was so many questions and so many if you look online there in Facebook, there's groups that have 50, 60, 70,000 people who were part of the nightscape or part of the Milky Way, landscapes. Gosh, there must be somebody who needs to learn that a little bit.
Okay.
So I kind of worked my way into it. I started teaching some regular classes, and then I've built up it was about a 4 or 5 hour daytime class where we go through everything. And I found that almost everybody, even if they say, gosh, I've shot a lot of Milky Way and I know how to do it. I said, well, we're going to start at the beginning and we're going to touch everything from just to make sure you have the full thing. And probably 80% of the folks go, oh my gosh, I never thought of that. I never thought of that. I never thought of that. And every time I get a new thing, that gets added in. Then we would go out and shoot. And then the next day we would do a whole thing on processing and bringing out those clouds in the sky and, and to show the Milky Way in all its beauty because of how we were able to capture it. So yeah, I kind of just, a buddy of mine actually kind of tweaked me to go ahead and do that. He was like, oh man, you should do I don't want to do workshops, but I travel around I went up to Michigan to do a class up there. There's supposed to be 25 people in the class. They had over 50. Well, not over 50. They had almost 50, which was really interesting because we went out to a dark sky area and everybody was just lined up along the lake. And I was running up and down. Nope, you're not in focus yet. You need to do this. You know what? What kind of a composition is that? What's going to happen a half hour from now when this happens? How are you going to get your foreground? How are you going to... Oh, sorry. I get too excited about this. You can't ask me questions like this and then ask me to be quiet.
Well, it's really difficult. Just focusing, at night is difficult. That in itself. So I remember the first night Dave and I went out. I got there a day or two before the start of the actual workshop. And so, we went out that first night, because I'd never seen the Northern Lights before. And he goes like, look, it's a good night for Northern Lights tonight. Let's go out, and you can experience them. As we went out, I tried to take some pictures. And I have to say, I came back, and I, uploaded the pictures on my computer, and I looked at them, and they're virtually, I think 90% of them were out of focus. Because it's actually hard. It's difficult. I can't see anything. What are you going to focus on? It's not easy.
There's an art to it for sure.
Absolutely. Now, when you're shooting so many different things, it's difficult to build up a brand. Or how do you build up your brand when you're first starting out?
I think I touched on that before, but focus on one thing and promote one thing. Your website should not say, I do weddings, I do commercial, I do pets, I do dogs, I do babies, I do... and you don't have great examples of all of those. So when I first started, I pointed myself as a commercial photographer. That was my focus and that was my push. That's what my website looked like. And that was all that was in there. And again, once you've targeted in on that, I was able to kind of spread out from there and start doing other things because people would say, hey, can you do X? Or can you do Y? Yeah, I can, I haven't done that a lot, but I can probably work that out for you if you're not in a rush, and then start gearing into that neighborhood. Eventually my websites, again, focus on one thing. So if you go to Successful-Photographer, it's about photography and about the Milky Way and about photographers promoting themselves and, learning from workshops and things like that. When you look at my BC photography, oh, wait, did I say that I have multiple websites? Because I don't want to be known as a generalist. When people are looking for commercial photography, bcphotography.com is just commercial work. My Successful Photographer is just for photographers. My coatesart.net is just my artwork. And then all my promotion kind of drives people to these different places depending upon, what's being asked for or what I'm trying to work on more. So, I'm not pushing my commercial work, but because I have a pretty good reputation here and I've been doing it for so long, And the website, like I say, I haven't really even updated that website a lot in a long time, which is a really bad thing, by the way. But I'm at the place in life where it doesn't matter. I'm not really pushing hard. If something comes in and it's an interesting project to me, I take it, or I farm it out to somebody else who I think would promote from my association, because I know the kind of work they do.
And again, that's actually a really important point that you made. Create different websites for different genres that you shoot. So you can be a generalist, but you can also be a specialist at the same time. Because
so there's another way to there's another way to do that. You can have different entry portals or different sections in your website that don't actually link together.
Right.
Well, you can have a section over here on photographing pets. You can have a section over here on photographing commercial work, and you can have a section over here that's all weddings. These do not touch each other. So, and then you promote each one the way you want. So you drive to the link that goes to the commercial work. You drive to so it's less expensive. It's more complicated to do it that way. I found over the years that it was just easier to go ahead and have separate websites for those things. And then I could also expense them out. Again, business, you want to make sure that you're thinking about business and, get a CPA once you start making enough money, because they will save you money ultimately. I don't know what they call them over in England, but, our certified public accountants.
Yes, accountants. That's it. I always say that, get an accountant. A lot of time people ask me like, oh, you've got 3 kids. I bet you'd want them to go into the creative field. And I always say, no, I want them to be accountants, because that'll help me. They'll help me out more.
Probably smart. Yeah. When you said you're, wanted to talk today about people coming into photography, it's like, it's not an easy time to get into photography. You have to really have some confidence. You have to really set yourself apart and learn the marketing and learn the business. I can't stress that enough. I was a great marketer, and then I became much better at business, especially my wife was saying, hey, you ain't got no money here at the end of the month. What's going on? And so then learning, again, becoming a member of, American Society of Media Photographers and the other associations helped me immensely.
Yeah, the business side is so important. I can't stress it enough. As many listeners and viewers know, I have a history in the music industry before I went into photography. And I used to run a business. I used to run a private music school that I set up, and I ran that for 12 years. And, it ended up, we ended up having 16 employees at the end and all the rest of it. And I didn't know a single thing about business, and I had to learn on the job. Literally, it was the logical thing for me to do at the time. It was the right thing to do, but I really didn't know what I was doing. And so as a consequence, I made a lot of mistakes. Had I gone, I don't know, and I spent maybe, I could have just done like an evening class in business or something like that, for a year. I would have been able to avoid a lot of those mistakes. The advantage was that when I set up my photography business, I had already made those mistakes and I'd already learned from them. And I had, then at least I could try and avoid making these very same mistakes. I made other mistakes, no doubt, but, at least I could avoid making those.
Well, that was that same thing that I said when we very first started, that, I worked in a bunch of different businesses before. I didn't become a professional photographer until I was in my late 20s. And I had worked in radio and I had worked in running I learned to market on other people's dimes. I learned my business skills on, because I was in a business, they were already, oh, okay, well, you need to worry about, what's your costs in, what are your costs out, what are your, how this stuff all works. Oh, how much taxes do you have to pay? If you're going to be in business and you're going to charge people, that's another thing that you need to do. You need to register and become a legal business. Yeah. Working under the radar doesn't help you and doesn't help other photographers, because you think, oh, well, I can charge less because I don't have to pay taxes. Illegal.
Yeah.
That's not
in every
right.
country.
Yes, it's not right. So it's important that your reporting, and that adds another layer to your business. How are you going to make sure that you're filing your taxes properly? Oh, CPA, make sure that you're insured. If you're going onto somebody's property and you're carrying gear with you and you set up a light stand and somebody knocks over the light stand and somebody gets hurt, it's your fault.
Yeah.
And, hopefully nobody's going to sue you, but, we live in a very litigious society. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
Is that the right word?
I
Anyway,
think so,
people
yeah.
like to sue for whatever reason. So, one of the things, making sure that your gear is secured properly, that you have sandbags and you just don't set it up, that you make sure that there's no little kids or dogs running around. This all sounds weird, but this is part of the things that you need to look for and be aware of.
Absolutely. I've had it all. I've had stands with soft boxes fall over because it was it was windier than I thought it was going to be, and all the rest of it. All of that stuff's happened on set. It does happen. I was lucky it didn't. Well, it hit me, which was fine. I had a few bruises. That was it. But it didn't hit anybody else. So I was lucky with that. Public liability insurance is actually, it is super, super important. In fact, I believe in the UK, I don't know what it's like elsewhere, but in the UK, it's actually illegal for you to work as a photographer if you don't have public liability insurance. So it's a requirement.
We are similar. There's many, if you're doing commercial jobs at, say, hotels and things, you have to show that you have what they call additional insured. For me to do my Milky Way classes, I have to insure the United States Department of Agriculture and the Coconino National Forest as an additional insured, so that in case somebody gets hurt on me, they can't sue them or get to them. That stuff is very important. You don't think about that, but that's a very important part of your business, to have insurance. And it doesn't really cost that much. I have probably, my building is insured and all my equipment's insured, and it's like under $500 a year.
Yeah.
At this point. And I have, I don't want to broadcast on the thing. I have a lot of equipment. You got computers. You got to make sure your computers are there. Do you have insurance if you screw up and lose files? You may have done a job, and what are you going to do if everything goes to heck in a handbasket? Business is a lot more than just saying, I'm a photographer, let's go, I'm going to make your pictures and I'll give them to you.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of layers.
Insurance is super important. Just, what do you do? If you're self-employed and you fall over and break your leg and you can't work for 6 weeks, what are you going to do then? You need to have insurance to cover those eventualities. That's super important. I remember the first time actually I got public liability insurance from my photography business, and in a weird way, it actually made me feel more legitimate in a sense, and it actually did have an impact on my imposter syndrome sort of thing, where I was thinking like, hey, actually I have insurance, now I'm not as useless as I maybe sometimes think I am.
Yes, it does. It's just an important part of being a member of society as well.
Yeah.
If you don't want to do that, if you get a chance to work with somebody else, which I tried to do when I first started, I just was unable to do it. But if you can, pretty much either do some interns, and you'd be amazed at what you learn just by trailing somebody at weddings and working in their studio for a little bit, and how the retouching goes and how the flow goes for everything. If you can spend some time with somebody who's already doing it successfully, you don't want to follow somebody who's, not doing well. But if you can, get to work with them and for them, you'd be amazed at what an education there. And also, make sure that they know, hey, I'm working toward being a photographer and I want to be the best photographer I can. And I'm watching you. How can I be of service to you? And maybe do a win-win thing. If you can do that, you'd be amazed at, how much more prepared you are to get into the full on, hanging out your own shingle.
Now, you mentioned a minute ago that it's harder now to get into photography than it has been in the past. Why is
Sure.
that? Does that have something to do with competition or technology, or why is it?
Everybody has a camera. there's a lot of things we as photographers asked for technology to get better. We asked for the digital cameras originally. We asked for the digital cameras to get better. We asked for Photoshop to get better and easier. We asked for all of these things. The iPhones now are making incredible images with people who they can push the button, and you have to compete against all of that as well. Why is your work better or worth more than, and when people are making their own, look, I made this, even if it doesn't look very good, I did that. So yes, that's going to be my headshot. And, how can you sell and teach people that your work is worth more to them? If you, again, we're back to the marketing. If you don't have a cogent reason for them to give you money to create what they think they can do on their own, you have a lot more competition. The other thing is there's so many people who are opening up and putting their shingles out again because they can get an okay exposure, and sometimes it's in focus image, and they say they're photographers, and so you're competing against people who don't know how to charge. They think that charging $100 for a day and to spend a day editing those images and giving them 160 images, you're competing against that. Why is your work worth more than this person who is pretty much giving it away? I get requests for some jobs, and I'm like, and yes, okay, so here's my pricing, and they're like, oh no, I could never pay that. And what I've found, especially this happened during COVID, where people were like, reining in and not spending the money and trying to find ways to save money. They were like, well, this is what I can pay to do this commercial job. Huh. Okay, well, I'll tell you, I can't afford to come out for that. Here, let me give you the names of some folks. And, 3-4 months later, I get a call. Hey, Bob, I do need you to do that job because I paid this person or, whoever I hired, and I didn't get what I needed, and it didn't work the way it should. It's not drawing the clients the way it should. So being able to say no is a really important part of being able to charge prices properly, because you're like, well, okay, well, if so-and-so could do it for that much, I guess I could. And, and then it's like, then you're in the downward spiral. It just goes, it's the race to the bottom where nobody's making any money. So you have to be confident enough to charge enough to be in business, to stay in business, and to say no to a job that doesn't meet your bottom line, that doesn't pay your rent, that doesn't, if you put all those things together, even if you're working from home, you've got space dedicated to that. You have equipment upgrades. Oh, wait a minute, I have to buy a new computer again. Oh, I need more storage. Oh, I've got to back up my stuff. I got to buy a safe to put it has to be a fireproof safe. That's installed and, is good to 120. It will never let it get over 125 degrees if I want to keep my digital media safe. Oh, those safes cost you about $2,500, maybe $3,000. Or you could put some at your neighbor's house and just rotate it around, or a bank vault, or, your safety deposit box. There's a lot of ways, but you want to make sure that you're backing up your materials. So these are all things that, you don't need to do immediately, but you need to do them pretty quick if you're going to turn this into a business.
That's actually, again, that's really great advice. The backing up thing is something that's very often forgotten about. Again, because sometimes, usually, there are costs involved, in doing that, and especially in the beginning, when you're just starting out your business, people are not exactly running in your door, and that's another thing. When you're sitting there and nobody's calling, the phone isn't ringing, right? You're not getting the emails. Nobody seems to be interested in your services. The first instinct is often to drop the price, because you immediately think like, oh, it's probably because I'm too expensive, so I'm going to drop the price. And I think that is one of the most commonly made mistakes, in fact.
Yeah. When I first started, and this may be helpful, I was tending bar on the side. So I had a nighttime job tending bar at 2 or 3 different places, and I was doing vacation fill-in, and so I kept some money coming in, and then I devoted my daytimes to building up my business. And I have to thank a guy named Jimmy, who was one of my bar customers when I said, yeah, I'm working toward becoming a professional photographer. And he was a boat captain, and he had a Hasselblad, and he was, oh, well, just because you say you're going to be a photographer doesn't mean you can be one. And so Jimmy was my impetus to go, I'll show you. It's good to have that energy pointing yourself in that direction, so that it's, if you need to work a regular job in whatever way it is, structure it if you can, so that you're not just trying to do photography as a weekend warrior. Structure it so you have a nighttime job, and then you can devote 4 or 5 hours a day, because consistency makes a big difference. Being there, being able to take a job if you have a full-on day job, and somebody says, hey, I have a commercial job and it needs to be done by Wednesday. Oh, yeah, I can't do that because I got, you're not giving yourself a chance.
Yeah, and of course nowadays there are really so many different opportunities to get some flexible work on the side, whether it's nighttime work or driving an Uber. I was in an Uber the other day, actually. That made me think about this, because I was talking to the guy. I had to get through some school, really way out in the sticks, what was happening? My car was being repaired at the time. I didn't have a car, so I had to get an Uber there, and I had to call. I mean, it was so far out of the sticks, I couldn't even get a mobile phone signal. So it was hard work even getting an Uber. But anyway, I eventually got this Uber. The guy picked me up, and he was driving me back into town, and I was having a conversation with him, and I just asked him, like, "Oh, did you live out here somewhere? Or like, what is it like driving an Uber out here in the countryside? It's like, three houses and a cow, and maybe a horse if you're lucky." I just thought there can't be that many customers around here. And he said, "No, I live in North London." And I'm thinking, well, how does that make sense? Because you're living in North London, one of the biggest metropolitan area in the country, if not in the whole of Europe, and yet you're driving an Uber out here in the countryside, in rural Buckinghamshire, where, in the leafy home counties. And he goes, well, the thing is this, right? I come out here, I drive all the way out here, 45 minutes or something, before I start my day of work. And I might get fewer fares out here, but each booking is going to be 10 plus, maybe 20 miles. Whilst if I work in North London, I'd be running myself ragged, but I'd be chauffeuring somebody 500 yards.
Yeah.
And so actually it made a lot more business sense to him. But the thing was, he was actually, he was building up a restaurant at the same time, and he just needed a flexible way of working around everything else. So he had to have the income. Driving an Uber was perfect, because he can work on a Monday if he feels like it, and then if he's got a day off on a Thursday, he can drive the Uber on a Thursday and make some money. So it was like, it struck me, well, this is perfect. You can do a job during the day, and then if you've got some extra time in the evening and need to make some money, drive Uber for a few hours. Perfect.
Yeah, the gig economy does have its pluses. I wouldn't depend on it full on, because I would use it as a stepping stone, because if you constantly depend on it, it may pop away. All of a sudden Uber is getting sued and they've taken their thing off and it's now just Lyft, or we've seen a lot of big changes in the social media type jobs that are out there. So, again, that's a good way to get going, but I wouldn't, depend on it heavy duty.
Let's talk about pricing for a minute, because we've mentioned the fact that undercutting or lowering your prices isn't a good idea. But how do you price? How do you come up with the right balance of pricing yourself when you first start out?
Okay. one of the things you don't do is just kind of query other people in your area or sneak your way in, and say, pretend to be a customer to find out what other people are charging. It's pretty tacky.
I've had
Again,
that.
huh?
I think we've all had that happen. Yeah, it's common.
Yeah, I get it on a regular basis, and I'm just like, really? You're starting a photography business, aren't you? What you want to do is, again, I recommend getting together with those professional associations because they are working pros and you can talk to them and they're willing to talk to you knowing that you're, working to become a pro. You need to find out what are your costs of doing business? How much do you want to get paid? So if you want to make, let's say it's your first year, you want to make $35,000 to put in your pocket at the end of the year. How much business do you have to do to make that $35,000? Well, you have your rent of whether you're renting a place or whether you're renting it from yourself. So there has to be a number for that. You have to have lights on. For most of your jobs, many of them, you'll have to leave and go drive to them. You have gas. You have time in the car for that. Are you charging for that time from portal to portal? Are you, how much, you're going to need to replace your computer. So you need to, and I know this sounds weird to put that in there, but that's all part of it. What happens if you break you got your insurance. Because you had your insurance, you're not getting hurt when you drop that lens and the tripod went over. So you put all of those costs into a basket. Okay, that's how much you need to generate every year to make that happen. Okay, so God, that's like $125,000 just to make 35. The numbers work better as you get better at what you do and it goes on. But let's say that's what your number is that you finally figured out. 125, that's just, there's no way I could make 125. Yes, there is. You divide that by 12. Divide that by 4. How much do you have to do a week? How much do you have to do a day? Once you've figured out those numbers, now you know what you need to charge, to get out there. There's no one answer that's right for everybody. But if everybody goes through this process, you've got your CPA, you got your insurance, you have your driving, your general expenses, you got to have pencils, you got to have paper, you got to have cards, you got to have your backup system. So all of those things get factored in to figure out what your bottom line is. So if you need to make, let's see, what was that, 125,000, and you're only going to work 5 days a week, you don't want to work 7 days a week. So now it's 5 days a week. How much do you need to make each day in order to make that to the $125,000? And I know that sounds really weird. And I'm like, well, Bob, tell me how much to charge. I can't. I don't know your market. I don't know.
Yeah.
But you need to find out what it costs you to be in business. And again, some business classes help with that. There's actually, I think there's some things you can go online and say, what does it cost me to be in business? And I think you can find some forms of things that I haven't even mentioned yet, probably that you need to have in consideration of your thing. But basically you break it down into bite, how to eat an elephant, one bite at a time. So don't kind of concentrate on, it's 120, it's 125, or it's $150,000. Okay, what do I need to make today? What goes on there? And then you make it into bite-sized pieces.
Yeah, and then, you have to factor in things like, how much time you spend shooting versus editing, all the rest of it, because you need to factor those things into, when you're pricing up a job, for example, and you got to be realistic with that as well. That's I think where experience comes in, because there's sort of a tendency to overall underestimate some of those times, a one-day shoot, massively.
Very easy to underestimate what it takes to get a job done, especially, when you're doing a job for a corporate thing, what are the deliverables? What? Yeah. Deliverables? Yes, that's a word that you need to know. deliverables are.
Yeah.
Are we giving them raw files? Probably shouldn't, but some companies will require that for their merchandise because they have good editors. If it's just somebody around the corner, you probably don't want to do that because they don't know what raw files are. What they mean is a finished file that's done, and usually that's in JPEG format. But how much time does it take you to get from the raw file, which I highly recommend you shoot in RAW, to the finished file? But my JPEGs look so much better, Bob, than my RAW files. Yeah, because you've allowed your camera to make a lot of decisions for you, and when it saves that as a JPEG, probably 50% of the information that's available in that file has been tossed as soon as it says, this is a JPEG. So.
And of course, deliverables, as you mentioned, are so super important because imagine, let's say you do a one-day shoot and the client wants one hero image. That is what you're gunning for. It's basically a hero image. That is what we're doing on that day. We're creating that image, right? As opposed to a job where you're shooting a full day, maybe it's an event or whatever it is, and the deliverables are difficult word to say. It's so late over here. Let's say you're delivering 250 shots, 300 shots, right? Sports event, I shoot boxing. I deliver 600 shots, sometimes more than that. The amount of effort that goes into the edit is vastly different. If you compare these two jobs, where it's like the one advertising shot that we're going for, there's a lot more effort that's gone into that one image than the 250, 400, 600 images that I'm delivering for this event shoot. There's a little bit of editing.
There's a quick hit, and okay, good, get rid of the blurs and the where they missed the punch or just you've missed the spot. Okay, make that go away. A quick cull. And I think also again, learning the language, pulling images out from a shoot is called culling. That's not called editing. Editing is when you're taking an image and massaging it and making it the best it can be.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people who confuse that word when they first start out. You're culling, you're pulling out the stuff that's, shouldn't be seen by anybody ever.
Yeah. And, even culling takes time. And so, just to give you a good example, or give our listeners a good example, a typical boxing event that I shoot has numerous fights happening that night. So there'll be anywhere between 20 and 26, 28, sometimes 30 fights in that one night. I have to shoot a set number of images per fight, and then there's certain money shots that I have to get, blah blah blah. But I have to essentially deliver a volume of shots within, and the turnaround is usually 24 to 48 hours. It's quite a quick turnaround.
Right.
Now, imagine if you're shooting 2,000 images, right? You've got to then go through all of those and then start culling images. But you still have to go through 2,000 images or 2,500 images, whatever, in the beginning. That takes a few hours, right? As opposed to if I only shot 1,000 images, that takes me half of the time. So it's learning not to overshoot on the job is super important because it saves you tons of time later. I remember when I switched, I used to shoot a Nikon D750 for a long time because I loved the sensor. It was relatively light. It's a little bit smaller than the 800 series. I really liked it. But it was a DSLR. And so the autofocus was really good, but there was a certain hit rate, I would say. When I switched to mirrorless, with eye autofocus, blah, blah, the hit rate is enormous. I mean, it's really rare that I see an image that's out of focus. And so now I'm looking at 2,500, let's say, or let's keep the math simple. Let's say I'm shooting 2,000 images. Now I'm looking at 2,000 images whereby 1,950 are perfectly in focus. Whilst with the DSLR, maybe only half of them were in focus or whatever. It actually makes the culling process a lot harder. So making sure that you don't overshoot is even more important. And, it's an experience thing. But what it does is, it massively reduces the amount of time that you spend in post-production, before you can deliver those images. And as I always say, if you're looking through, let's say you're actually editing 800 shots. If I can save 10 seconds on every edit, that's 10 seconds times 800, which all of a sudden amounts to a huge amount of time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
And
easy, it's easy to get sucked in and be doing time and not billing for time that you have to work if you don't understand some of this stuff. But some of this stuff comes from I'll never do that again.
Big time. Especially with those kind of shoots. It's I remember in the very beginning I used to edit like through the night, just to make the deadline. And at some point it's like, I'm doing something wrong. Like I have to change my model because this isn't happening. And, and then also the realization that in these instances, I'm not delivering art. This isn't art. This is commercial photography that's going to get printed, on 5x7, like, as, the output is 5x7 prints or something. It's like we're not retouching fashion shoots here or commercial advertising shoots or something. They end up on the side of a bus. Or, you just have to be realistic with the amount of effort you put into this particular project so it matches with what you're actually billing for, I think.
Exactable.
Exactable. It's very European of you. Brilliant.
Oh, I thought I'd throw a little bit at you. I know you're over there on the other side of the pond.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the weather here isn't remotely as good as I assume it is in Arizona. But hey, it's one of those things. Let's talk about getting those jobs through the door, because that's the thing. Let's say you've got your pricing worked out. You know exactly how much you need to make. You've got your website up and running. You've got your cards printed. You know exactly what you want to do, but the phone isn't ringing. What is the next step? Like, how can you get yourself out of that rut? What is it that you need to do at that point?
Get off your butt. And by that I mean knocking on doors. You can go straight to the folks and just, make sure they see your face, make sure they know you're friendly, make sure you can send out, you can do really solid marketing pieces and send those out. If you have a very specific high-end job that you're trying to do, show the people that you can do that kind of work and get it to them. Sometimes that, if you're looking for really high-end stuff, once you get to that kind of spot, then you're looking at maybe FedExing something to the president of the company, or find out who does the actual decision making. That's who you want to talk to, because you can get somebody who goes, oh yeah, that would be great, and then they get to the marketing person and they're like, no, we've got so-and-so that we've been using for X years. If you didn't get to the person who's making the final decision, you run in. So if you're doing weddings, you take your sample work and you go to wedding venues and you knock on doors, and you knock on the doors or call the wedding planners, the people who tell the bride and groom, oh yeah, you want to use this photographer and you want to use this baker and this. You want to get to the influencers. Oh wait, if you're doing weddings, you want to go to the hairdressers and to the nail stores, and you want to promote yourself there and do things for them. When I was trying to do high-end weddings, I would bring a 16 by 20 image of a approved by the client that it was okay that I was doing this, of a wedding happening on their property and really done well. Along with that, I might give them a whole album that was done specifically for them of their property. I would supply them with a little folder, a little folio of images. I had little 5x7 things made with Bob Coates photography and, exceptional imagery in gold embossed on the front. You open it up, it's embossed in the middle, but there's two little sleeves. Inside there, they would get images from the wedding about their property. Now, whether that's the florist, the whoever supplied the wine, an artistic image of the wine, the jewelers, whoever, the hairstylist, whoever, they would all get these little packets. Oh, and wait, they were in Bob Coates photography, exceptional imagery, embossed bags of velvet bags with a drawstring. And I would go, hey, just, I wanted to say how much it was fun to work with you guys. Here's, here, I just wanted to say thank you. And if you need anything, specific for advertising and stuff, we can talk about that, depending upon how many weddings you sent my way. You're not just you just don't want to give stuff away, but you want to show them something of value that you care about, because then they can take those images and put them into their books and say, yes, look at what this florist did for it. Look at our property because you've highlighted it and done it in such a good way. So that's for weddings. For doctors' offices, if you want to, go knock on the doors and they have, the big groups, and, they always need that group shot that's in there. You let them know that you have a method for saving them time, so that every time a doctor leaves and a new doctor comes in, they don't have to assemble the entire group together. You can have it set up so that you have everything set the first time you do it. After that, you make individual, or when you do it, you make individual pictures of people this way, that way, this way. So you have them in all these different positions, and they're all at exactly the same distance from the camera in exactly the same lighting. And then, oh, Lordy, look at this. With Photoshop, I can make a group. And then your group is done. And you're like, oh, the doctor in the middle is no longer there. Whoop. Let's put another doctor in there. And then you're teaching them and showing them. And that works for doctor's office, dentist's office, lawyers, any professional group, real estate agents. When you can show them that you can save them time, for them, time is money. How can you save them money by charging them more money? And that's the kind of thing. I don't know, have I thrown enough ideas at you yet?
Loving it. We've spoken about how to get over the imposter syndrome. We've spoken about how to set your pricing, how to do your marketing, and really what to do when the phone isn't ringing, which I think should cover most things that anybody starting out with a photography business or in a photography business should know. But if there was one tip that you would give somebody who's just starting out, what would it be?
It can't just be one, Kirsten. It's a little pile. Learn marketing. I just gave you some really cool marketing ideas that set you apart from the next person. I was a great marketer, so I was busy right from the beginning and was able to raise my prices quickly after I realized how much I was losing every time I did a job. The other thing is practice. Be good at what you do. And, even when you're getting ready to go do a shoot, sometimes it's good to practice on that same day. If you haven't done a headshot in a while, you might want to reset and, get your little fake model in there, or your wife or daughter or whatever, and put them in front of the camera and reset your stuff. And just so that you can walk in, set your stuff up quick, know that the client's time is not going to be wasted, and you're going to get a good solid image, as opposed to, oh gosh, I really didn't have that light in the position, and that shadow going across the nose there that falls into this spot over here. Oh, darn. You wouldn't make that mistake if you had practiced the morning that you shot. So practice, marketing, set yourself apart. That's my one thing.
Fantastic. Bob, this was a treasure trove of useful information for anybody, like I said, anybody taking the first steps into the world of photography. Thank you so much for being a guest on the Camera Shake podcast this week.
Oh, Thanks for having me. It was great talking to you, Kirsten, and enjoyed some of the, picked up some ideas from you as well. That's what it's all about.
All right, folks, that is it for today. It was awesome having Bob on the show. As always, before we wrap up, let me just recommend another episode I'm sure you'll enjoy. Check out episode 216 with Matthew Brown, where we talk about capturing breathtaking landscapes. I'm sure you'll love it. If you enjoy our content, consider supporting us on buymeacoffee.com/CameraShake to help us continue bringing you exciting episodes. It truly means the world to us. And for those of you tuning into the audio version, did you know we have a fully fledged video version over on YouTube in full Technicolor? Head over to YouTube, search for CameraShake Podcast, and check out all past episodes. And while you're there, drop us a comment, hit the like button, ring the bell, and share the episode with your friends. Your engagement helps us reach photographers all around the world. Thanks again for watching and listening. And remember, a new episode drops every Thursday, so make sure you mark that in your calendars. Until next time, keep shaking things up in the world of photography. See you next Thursday.